All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on an overview of Solicitors account for the July and August MCT 2020. My name is Priyasha, and I'm going to be moderating today's session along with Astha.
Hello, everyone.
Just a few housekeeping, tips before we start. We are going to be taking questions at the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat and we will address them towards the end. Also, I mean, I've unmuted all of you right now, but towards the end, I'm going to open up the floor for discussion. And what you could do is you could raise your hand in Zoom and we can then take your question. Alternatively, you can just enter your question on chat and we will address them. Perfect. So a quick introduction to the speakers before we begin. So I'm Priyasha and I'm a corporate lawyer based in the UAE. I qualified as a solicitor in 2018. Astha is who's going to be the key speaker for today. She's a lawyer based in Germany and she qualified as a solicitor in 2019. A little bit of self-promotion of QLTS Geek before we start. We just recently, I'm not going to talk much about QLTS Geek because you can learn more about us through our website. But we have released our web app recently in the interest of those taking the July and August MCT. So we have currently uploaded a few mock tests. So if any of you want to practice questions, then feel free to log on and register on our platform. Also follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram for updates because we're constantly upgrading our content as well as our app. Our mobile app is not out yet. We are working on it and it should be up very soon. Let me just, okay. Yes, we will be recording today's session as well. So, we will update it, we'll upload it on YouTube in case you have any issues with joining in. Okay, so today's agenda for today is we're going to be covering the basic concepts of solicitor's account. And this is in the interest of those who are finding it difficult to wade through this technical subject by yourself. We're not going to go into details, but I think the most important takeaway for today's session is going to be how to identify errors. So you can sort of, eliminate the wrong answers, and that's going to increase the chance of getting a good score on solicitor's account. We're also going to briefly cover the MCT marking criteria and time management. And then finally, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end, and we're going to address all your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the floor to Astha, and she's going to be teaching us, including myself, on a lot of on the key points for solicitor's account that all of you should bear in mind for the MCT. Over to you, Astha.
Thank you, Priyasha. Let's jump right into the topic. So today we'll be covering the module 8.3, knowledge of the rules of professional conduct, which includes the SRA account rules. This is an overview which you can see on your screens as well, a guidance on what is expected of us in the exam. Most of the things we will try to cover today, but if we are not able to cover, you can always reach out to us later. You can find the overview on the SRA website as well. What is important to note is that the accounting entries will be expected as well in the exam. So it is going to be the practical part of the MCT exam, just to bear in mind that there are going to be practical questions with regard to number of areas which we will try to cover today. If not, of course, you can feel free to reach out to us later on. Yeah, so just for the sake of completeness, We will be talking today about the SRA accounts 2019. There has been change from SRA accounts rules 2011, which is important because a lot of students right now might have old books. So it's important to note that there has been a change in the SRA accounts rules in 2019 and to bear in mind these changes.
Just one question, Asta, sorry to interrupt, but the previous slide, essentially, that was the syllabus for the SRA account rules, right? So I suppose all the candidates can have a detailed look at the day one outcomes on the SRA website.
Yes, it's also mentioned on the slide itself,
Okay.
towards the very end. It has a link to the where you can find a day one outcome. Of course, it's a guidance only. There are aspects which you can find in the OUP books, and also the theory part could be covered by, I think you can go through it later also, Priyasha, like how students would.
Yeah, we can discuss that.
So as said, there have been changes in the SRA accounts rule in 2019, significantly changing the definition of client money account. We will go through it later on. There has been there is now a requirement that a bill of cost or a written notification should be given to the client if for the fees and if it is taken from the client money account, before it is taken from the client money account. There have been changes on the definitions, on the promptly usage of the term promptly. Earlier it was same day or the next day, and now there's more flexibility. Significant for the exam itself is the terminology of office account, which we will try to cover today, has been removed. So the office account concept has been removed. It is now it's only referring to client account, and whatever is not a client account, client money account, will be known as business account. So just in case you have older books or access to questions which mention office account, not to confuse, it would be called business account, or maybe it is called office account still, just that they are same. Office account and business accounts are similar, same.
One question, Asta, where can the candidates, access the new rules? Are they on the SRA website?
Yes, they are very much present on the SRA website as well. And I would really recommend that the students who are going to attend the exam should go through them. They are not really large. I have them in my hand as well right here. So they're not really thick. The previous 2011 rules were really a lot of them, but now they have become more, I think, user-friendly and friendlier to the solicitors, I think. So it's available on the website.
Okay, thank you.
So accounts, I think for accounts is when we talk about accounting, we talk, of course, about the double entry bookkeeping for solicitors account. Double entry bookkeeping for the ones who are not familiar with the concept of debit and credit. I have prepared this cheat sheet, so to say, just to equip yourself with how it works. If you're not able to follow the logic of debit and credit, I try to make it clear on this slide. We will go through an example to make it further clearer. So double entry bookkeeping is a method of recording transaction which allows a check to be made on the accuracy of the recording. They're divided between two categories, debit or credit. Here we have four boxes. So all your accounts, whatever you are dealing with in your practice, will have to fit into one of the box. So liabilities, assets, income, and expenses. So you have number of accounts. You have cash, which is your asset. You have rent, which is your expense. You have profit cost, which is your income. There are outstanding liabilities, which will come under the liability section. This cheat sheet makes it clearer for how to deal with the entries. So liability accounts are debited when they are decreasing. The opposite is also true, which means that liability accounts are credited when they are increasing. asset accounts are credited when they are decreasing. The opposite, of course, goes that the asset accounts are debited when they are increasing. And for the income, it follows the same. Income accounts are debited when they are decreasing. Expenses for expense account are credited when they are decreasing. I think it will be clearer when we go through the example. Yeah, so Priyasha, do you have any questions?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think my only question was, is there any some sort of a list of what falls under assets, liabilities, income, expenses? How do candidates sort of get that
The good thing,
idea?
yes. So for solicitors, the good thing is that you will be only dealing with a limited range of accounts, which you can obviously find in the books you are consulting or through the examples. So they are not like, in reality, of course, there are a number of accounts, but for solicitors, we will be only talking about the bill of cost. We will be talking about the profit cost. We are talking about the VAT, rent. The list can be obtained on, I think, very easily on Google. Just have to put in like what falls under which account. Just have to just Google it. But so far, I haven't seen one list because there are many of them. It'll be good to practice with what a limited number of accounts we have with the solicitors practice. And yeah, and it's more about practice now than going through a list, because list can be, there could be number of accounts and we don't have to deal with everyone. So just limit your self to the practice questions and see what a solicitor will deal with in terms of accounts. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a good news that we only have limited accounts that we're going to be dealing with. So I think if we remember this box, the rules in this box, then that's going to actually help us quite a lot for the exam, because let's say cash comes under asset.
Yes.
So if cash is decreasing, then it should be debit cash account.
Credited, yes.
Sorry, yeah, credit. Yeah, okay, accredited cash account. See, I'm not good at accounts at all. Could you
yes.
also let us know a little bit about the last 2 points that you mentioned in the slide, which is money is recorded in the debit column when it is being transferred to an account?
Is a hack. What we used as well in accounting is like, we say that when money comes in, it's debited. When money goes out, it's credited. But it is just something which you can use to eliminate. You can see it here. Money is recorded in the debit column, which is the left column of the ledger, when it is being transferred to an account, right? So it comes in the account. Money is recorded in the credit column, which is the right column when it is transferred from an account. So it's a hack. I think I would rely on the 4 boxes there and try to practice with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think once we see a few examples, we will probably get it better. Yeah, so let's move on to a few examples.
I took this example from the Kaplan site. It's a sample on MCT. I think it also gives a fair amount of idea on how we are going to deal with these kind of questions in the exam. So I would give you all to read this question for a minute. I will read it out loud as well, but please take your time, read it out. A firm is acting on behalf of a client in a litigation matter. The claim by the client has now been settled and damages have been received by the firm. The firm retains the fund on client account for 2 weeks whilst the client has a holiday. The firm decides to pay the client interest for the 2 weeks it has held the funds. Which of the following should be included in the posting that record the payment of interest? Yeah, should I move on, Priyasha? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I've read the question, so yeah, I hope everybody else has as well.
So the correct answer is A, because we are talking about two accounts here. We are talking about interest payable, which is a liability, and a decreasing of a liability because we are paying the interest is debited. We go back to our 4 columns. And the cash we are dealing with is the cash to be paid. So the cash is an asset account, which decrease of which would be credited. for me, what I did during my writing of this exam, I would fix one part which I'm pretty sure about. So of course, if you know the answer, so you will save a lot of time. If you know what entries have to be made, then you will save at least from 2 minutes, you will save a minute, or half, you will save 1.5 minutes. But if you're still struggling with a correct answer, we will go through the round of elimination to see how we will now eliminate the wrong answer to get to a right answer. So for this question, I know that the cash account is to be credited because it is a decreasing, right? So I fix my credit cash account, which helps me to already eliminate option E, because here you see E, credit client ledger client account, and option B, which is the debit cash sheet business account, right? So I've already eliminated B and E. Now I'm left with D, C, and A. For me, I see D as already out because there are 2 credit. Very importantly, there has to be credit and debit. So it's a double entry system. It has to be debit and credit. And of course, they have to be same amounts. So for me now, I have eliminated D already. Now I'm left with C and A. For C, as it is talking about the cash, both of them on the top, you will see credit cash account, client account, debit cash account, cash sheet business account. So they are, both of them are cash account. And I know I have to deal with 2 kind of accounts. I'm paying the interest. So it is interest payable ledger and the cash sheet. So my answer is then A, which is debit interest payable ledger, credit cash sheet business account.
Yeah, I think that's quite useful. A question that I have is, what is a client ledger? Like, what are the sort of accounts that would fall under client ledger? Like, because I might, like, let's say if I had been attempting the question, I might have gotten confused. I might have thought that, oh, you know, the money, the damages that the firm has received, it's client money, so it should go under client ledger. So, but of course the answer is interest payable because that's interest payable to the client. So my question is, what exactly is client ledger?
Yes, so we will come to that. I took this example just to make the rule of thumb on accounting clearer, but we will deal with the differentiation between client account and business account, if that was your question.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's my question.
I took this example to explain how the four boxes would work in this situation. So
Yeah.
how to eliminate wrong answers. So one of them, there are 5 or there could be multiple ways to eliminate wrong answers. I have taken these 5, which account is affected. So I have to see, is it a client account or a business account? We will come to that. So generally the debits are listed first and then the credits. Look out for 2 debits, 2 credit. We had it with this example as well. We had 2 credits. So this is another way of elimination of wrong answer. The debit amount should be equal to credit amount. We did not have a number in this answer, in this question, but in the exam, we could get a question with numbers and we have to see if the credit matches the debit, right? And or if we have covered all the ledgers, that's also key to this question. Have we considered all the accounts which needs to be considered? Priyasha, how is it going for you? Is it clear now, or do you have more questions? Should we take some questions?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So if anybody has any questions, you can raise it, or the other option is we go through some more examples and we can take questions after that. If everyone's okay, maybe if you could just type a few yeses in our chat and then we'll move ahead. Then, you know, you'll see more examples and we can get some better ideas. Okay, I think I've got a private message saying let's proceed, please. So maybe we should go ahead. Yeah, I think people are comfortable. Let's move on and then we can take questions at the end.
Yes. So as we already mentioned that we will be dealing with two types of accounts, so client money and office money. It is important that we note that the definition of client money has changed. So client money is a money held or received by you. Here you means a practice or a solicitor firm relating to regulated service delivered by you to the client on behalf of a third party in relation to regulated service delivered by you as a trustee or office holder in respect of your fees and any unpaid disbursements held or received prior to delivery of a bill. So the easiest way to explain it is that whatever money which is not the practices money, which still is where I have maybe have delivered services, but I haven't delivered the bill, it would still be considered as client money. And whatever is not client money, which belongs to the firm, would be considered as business or office money, and we will deal with the entries accordingly.
Okay, so just a few questions here again. So business money would essentially be a solicitor's professional fees, right?
Yes. Yes. So it's what belongs to the practice. Yeah.
And what about third-party disbursements of a solicitor? That would also be business office money, right?
So this is an important point. Money for the firm fees or any unpaid expert fee that have been received before a bill has been sent to the client would be still considered as client money. So in order for you to put the money, the disbursement money in the office account, you have to serve the client the bill of cost. So this is important to know.
Okay, yeah, I think, yeah, that's important because let's say that we've incurred fees for, yeah, like a expert. So if we haven't sent the bill, then it's actually client money. But as soon as we send the bill, it becomes office money.
Yeah.
Because we've sent an invoice. Okay. Okay,
Sorry.
Yeah, let's see some examples. Yeah.
Yes, I think one of the basic example is when you, as a practice, when you deliver a bill of, here we have to deliver a bill of 300 plus VAT to Mrs. Chang, who is a client. So how we deal with this entry, or how do we make entry? So first we will deliver the bill. For that we will have to debit the client's ledger account, and this is business account. We will come to that why. And then credit the profit cost account will again be a business account. And then we will treat the VAT. Here in this case, we will be receiving the VAT as well. So debit the client's ledger account. Here we have the 60 as VAT, and credit the VAT account or the HMRC account by 60, which again will be business account. This is not client money because it is the money which the client owes to the practice. The money, the bill of cost have been served, of course. And profit cost is income. Again, we go to our 4 columns and we see that there is an increase in the income. That's why it is credited. How do you feel, Kasha, about this entry?
No, I have a question. Like, right now, isn't it cash which is increasing? Or because when you have 300 pounds coming into the solicitors, business, isn't that cash, or is that because you're classifying it as profit? So
yes, we will. Yes. I don't want to give a wrong answer on why is it not considered as cash and why is it considered profit, but I can come back to this question. But here we will, when we are dealing with the delivery of bill, we always consider the profit cost account.
Okay, so essentially anytime a bill is delivered, the money coming in would be considered as profit.
Profit cost, yes. Yeah.
Okay, and Ms. Chang, ledger is essentially anytime bills are served to a client, it would be a client ledger account.
Yes, that's very important.
Okay. And what about HMRC? Can you give us that example using the 4 tables? I mean, the 4 columns that you...
Yes, HMRC, in this, it is not an expense, so it might look like an expense. because there is a VAT, but here we are receiving it. So this is an income for us and therefore it's credited. And that's how I have treated this as credit VAT account.
Okay. Would it be like can it be considered a liability, the VAT account?
Only when we will come to that, how to treat VAT.
Okay.
Full, we have a chapter on that as well. So we will.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I know, because it's very hard to cover everything in, I know, 1 hour, but I think I get the flow.
Okay. Right. Another question which comes up in the exam is the transfer of money. So we will be asked in the exam, like to move funds from client account to office account or business account, and how should we deal with it? I think important to know is that if you require payment of your fees from the money you hold for a client, you must first send them a bill of cost. We've covered it now several times, or other written notification of the specific amount. You may then transfer that amount for the client account to your business account, provided there are sufficient funds held on behalf of the relevant client. So you have to make sure that your client account has sufficient funds for you to transfer it to the office account. So we take the example here. On 4th of May, you transfer £630 from your client's account to the business account. You're currently holding £1,000 on the client account on behalf of that client. So should I go through the entries, Priyasha?
Yeah, but just again, out of curiosity, stupid question, but like, why would you transfer money from your client account to the business account? Business account is like.
Now the bill of cost have been served, Priyasha. Let's take back.
Got it. Okay, I understand. So basically, yes, that makes sense. So £630 goes because you serve the bill, so the £630 goes from the client to the business account. Okay, perfect.
First, we will now, the treatment will be like we will withdraw the money from the client account. So it will be crediting of cash account. Again, we go back to the 4 columns. Again, we're dealing with the client account here and not the business account, because you're withdrawing funds from the client account. So the debit will be off the client ledger and the credit will be off the cash account of the client, right? The payment is then made to the business account. So here we will then transfer the cash to the business account. So we have increase in the cash. So it's increase in the asset. So we have debited it, business account or business section. And then client ledger has been reduced. So it's credited by 630. We will follow the same method when we are doing the other way around from business account to client account.
Okay, so there are essentially 4 entries that happen when you're transferring money from your client account to business account. There's a double entry in the client account, and then there's a double entry in the business account as well.
Yes, and in the exam, when you've been asked this, when we have to matter with this question, what we can then obviously see is that we can again fix a part where we're comfortable with, or we know that first we have to deal with the client account and there will be business account treatment. So just to make sure that first we know we fix a part of the answer which we think is correct, and then apply the rule of elimination as we proceed. And some of them will be very straightforward elimination, where there could be business and client account mix in one entry, in the double entry. And there could be, there could be different ways. I mean, there could be difference. The sum could be different in the exam. It could be 1,000. And that will be another way of elimination. If we, in this example, if we had gotten £1,000 in the entries, then we know it's not a correct answer. So I'm just trying to explain how to eliminate. If you're still not sure which is the right one, you can still use the method of elimination. I took this example from the QLTS Geek Sample Practice Questions, which you can, of course, subscribe to. I will again read it out loud and take your time to read it as well. A client, Sarah, sends pound 200 to your law firm to pay for a debt owed to the firm by another client, Barry. The firm's account department emails Sarah to confirm that the funds are to be used for Barry's matter file, and Sarah replied by email to confirm which of the following is the best answer. So here I've taken this example because in the exam, it can also be that it's not just the correct answer has been asked, it could also be that the best answer is asked. So the correct answers in this case are all the A, B, C are all correct, but C is the best answer because so long as the client's instruction to do so are obtained, the money received from client from paying the bill of another client may be paid directly to the business bank account. So that's why I have taken C as the best answer and not A and B, but they are also correct, just that C is the easiest. And um, I would again say that read the SRA account rules. It will also help to come up with the best answer as well. If this kind of question is asked in the exam, the rules are also very self-explanatory on why certain entries are made. Here we have confirmation, and one of the rules is that if you have the confirmation from the client, you can pay it directly to the office bank account.
I was wondering, for D and E, could you explain how do we use the elimination method here?
Yes. So for D, I mean, of course, Sarah's ledger account is not affected. This is not correct. Sarah's ledger account is also, we have to consider, sorry, I have to read it also myself. Can I come to this question like later?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Because I'm just thinking that Sarah probably there wouldn't be a ledger account for Sarah, right? Because she's not really, okay, she's also a client, I
Yes,
see.
they both of them are clients, so therefore I
Mm-hmm.
need to see as well for myself. Don't give wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
We can also come back to this example later on if everyone else also have this question. We can just
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
yeah. There are other areas as well. We'll just quickly go through them. They are this a payment for an agreed fee, a payment from a client for a fixed agreed fee after you have delivered a bill is your firm's money and should be paid into the office account or the business account. I've also explained the double entry here, cash account to be debited and the client ledger account to be credited. A payment on account of cost. A payment on account of cost is generally client money and must be held in client's account. This is when you have delivered the services, but you haven't issued the bill. Yeah. In case number 3, in case the client does not have sufficient money in the client bank account, where the client has insufficient money in the client bank account to cover his expenses, the business must pay the expenses from the business account and recover this amount from client thereafter. These are the rules which you can find also in the SRA rules. I am just reading them loud because they are more important than other rules, and I've picked the ones which I felt were important as compared to the other rules.
Okay, can you come again on a payment on account of costs?
Yeah.
So what do you mean by payments on account of
It is
costs?
when you have delivered the services, but you haven't, or you are in the process of delivering the services, but you haven't really issued the bill of cost. So this is where it will still be in the client account.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's the example that you mentioned earlier, which is a disbursement which you haven't billed.
Yeah.
It would stay in the client account. So it's only when you bill it, then it moves to the business account.
For VAT, we take it as 20%. So solicitors are entitled to recover VAT from expenses incurred by them. I think we have covered the VAT example and the payment to the HMRC. So I won't go again into detail, but it's important to know that if VAT is not, as in, if VAT is mentioned, but no amount is mentioned, how to calculate is it's the 20% of your services, so the fee, so it's 20% of the fee, yeah, to be added on top of the fee, right? So you can recover that as a solicitor. Yeah. We have some other concepts. Sorry for this typographical error at number 6. So abatement of fee is also I have seen in number of examples. Abatement of fees has also been asked. So there are situations in which client requests a reduction in fee and solicitor is forced to agree to the client request. This situation is called the abatement of fee or issuing of a credit note. And VAT will also needs to be reduced accordingly. So what we are essentially doing with abatement of fee is that we are reversing the entries which you remember from the first example of serving the bill of cost. We will be reversing those entries. So for a normal entry for delivering of a bill of cost is debit the client ledger account, business section, credit profit cost, business section, and VAT normal entry I've also explained is the debit of client ledger account and the credit of HMRC. When you are doing the abatement, you have to look out for that is opposite of what you have the normal entry for a serving of bill of cost. So this is another question which could come up as a confusion question where they maybe mention the normal entry for delivering of bill of cost. So you have to look out how that that you are reversing in abatement of fee, you're reversing the entries. And you only reverses by the amount you are agreeing to reduce. So if you are agreeing to reduce by £60, you will use that amount in the double entry. And of course, 20% for VAT will be according to the reduced fee, right?
Yeah, because I think they might give a trick number sometimes. So let's say that you agree to abate your fees by, let's say, £100. Then it should be £100 in the debit and the credit section, right? Not the whole amount. Let's say a whole bill was £1,000. It could be possible that they mention £1,000 in your debit and credit entries, but that's not the right answer. It should be for abatement of fees. It would only be the reduction, which is the £100.
Yes. Right. Abatement of fee, we also seen in a number of practice questions and also something which is an easy win if you know the concept of abatement, that you're just reversing the entries. I would say it's an easy win. You don't have to put in so much effort in looking at the entries. Yeah. So bad debts, a bad debt is one that is written off because a debt is unable to be recovered from the client. A firm will hold a bad debt ledger, which is an expense account. So we go back to the treatment of expense account with our 4 columns, which is then debited by the bad debt, expense account, which is debited by the bad debt, which is written off. So what we will do is that we will debit the bad debt expense account, business section, very important. Client hasn't paid us, so it is affecting our business section, and then credit the client ledger account, business section.
So this is again the rule, sorry, like when an expense account is decreased, then you debit it.
Yes. Yes.
And then when it increases, then you credit it. So right now, the bad debt account is affected. It's decreasing because the firm's not getting the money, so you debit it, and then you credit the client ledger. Okay, I understand. So the client ledger would anyways be the opposite, so you don't really have to think through it. So if bad debt is coming down, is increasing, which is debit, the opposite would happen to the client ledger, which is credit.
Yeah.
And what happens to the VAT? Because in this case, we've already expensed the VAT, right?
Yes, sorry, I need to come back to the bad debt expense. So it is expense, right? So the expense account are credited when they are decreasing. So they are debited when they're increasing. Here we have an increase of the bad debt. So therefore it's being debited, just to clarify. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, of course, that makes sense.
Yeah, so the treatment of VAT is also important here because and also the time period, right? If include the VAT claim if the bad debt is less than 6 months old, as VAT cannot be claimed immediately. So you will include the VAT amount, right? If it is bad debt is 6 months old, because that VAT we cannot then claim immediately from HMRC. Yeah, I see a lot of confusion.
Yeah, that's because I'm actually not really that great at accounts, and I've also forgotten a lot of concepts, which is why this is a refresher for me as well. But I'm just thinking when it comes to VAT relief, uh, can we apply? I'm trying to apply the 4 boxes, the 4-column rule to, you know.
What did I do? Sorry, I think I just,
Yeah, I think you have to just
sorry.
scroll.
What did I do? Sorry.
Yeah, I think you just went forward. You need to just go
Need to
back.
go back.
Okay, I
Sorry.
think we have a question here. Maybe we can just take it. Can you explain why the VAT relief on the last line was 2 credit entries? Is that an error?
When VAT relief can be claimed on the bad debt in 6 months, you mean?
Yeah, because there's a credit HMRC and credit bad debt expense.
Oh, sorry, that's an error. Sorry, that's an error.
So what is the right?
It is debit HMRC and credit the bad debt expense.
Okay, debit HMRC. Okay, but so can we apply that 4-column rule here to the bad debt expense? Because when it comes to VAT, what's happening?
So I go back to the expense again. Expense accounts are credited when they are decreasing, right? So bad debt is increasing, so therefore we debited it. See the opposite, yeah. And here, when VAT relief can be claimed on the bad debts in 6 months, here we have now received it from the HMRC for the amount which we have for the VAT claim. And for the bad debt expense, we have to credit it is because the bad debt expense is decreasing here because we can now claim the VAT back from the HMRC. Does it make sense? Because we have need to figure out like how to explain it the best. If you have this, maybe we can later on make a note of all the questions, and then I can take them individually as well. And yeah, like
No, I think I think I get it, because in this case, it's increasing, so you're crediting it, right? When you claim VAT relief.
yes.
Yeah, so there would be a credit, and then in any event, your HMRC account is will have to be credited. That's the opposite.
Yeah, but I think it's because of the typographical error here. It's the
Yeah, you want to correct it? You can probably just do it right now. Yeah, that would.
oh,
Yeah.
I just need to again go back to the presentation mode.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you can go. Yeah, you can go to the presentation mode.
Okay. Should we move on, Priyasha, or?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I hope things are slowly making a little bit of sense. I know this is all last minute preparation, so there is going to be an element of well, let's say memorizing certain things, because even I, to be honest, there are certain concepts that I didn't exactly understand for accounts when I did the MCT, because I never really studied accounts as such in greater detail while during my university.
But
But
that's
what I did is Yeah, but what I did is I again learned all these rules, and I learned the elimination rules, and I think that is going to help for all of you who are doing last minute preparation for
Yes,
for solicitors account.
very correct there, because I mean, right now, I mean, when you're writing the exam in July, I wouldn't like really go deep into bad debts, so much detail, not too much in detail, but just memorize. Right now, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, I think also another thing to memorize is the accounts which are being affected. Like, for example, abatement of fees is a very common question. So if you know, if you just sort of keep in mind the accounts which are being affected, like your client ledger, um, and what is the other one, and your profit account, so then when you actually come across such a question in the MCT, you will be able to sort of eliminate the right and the wrong answers.
yes,
Even for bad debt is also quite a common question. So this is again something that you can just try. You can probably make a sheet in your make like a one pager with all of these common sort of accounting entries that you would sort of get in an MCT question.
yeah.
So I would just say that abatement of fees, bad debt, there's an element of probably memorization involved if you don't completely understand. And that's what I also did, which is not really great advice, but it's probably okay advice for those of you studying last minute.
I think another respite is that in the exam, at least it was my experience that they did not ask very difficult questions. It's because they understand that we are solicitors, we are not accountants. So there is that kind of I hope there is that kind of relief. One could feel that it will not be very difficult question. Something if you know the rules last minute also, and if you memorize the four elements, the liability, asset, income, and expenses, and the how the accounts are moving, I think that should be enough for the exam, and especially if it is last minute.
Yeah, no, I think that's useful. We can perhaps move on.
There are other concepts also, Priyasha, I think I've seen in the exam: conveyancing, something not to miss, and the dishonoring of checks. I cannot, even with bad debts, it's not complete. So bear in mind that this is not complete treatment of bad debts account as well. Conveyancing and dishonoring of checks also require number of entries, which cannot be covered now. With huge audience as well. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them later on and help in case you have a specific question. Yeah. I think we can now swiftly move on to some of the points which we have already probably touched, and but it's good to remember these points. We have talked about the client money. We have talked about the separation of client money from client money and the office money. And then we have also talked about that the SRA rules make it clear that if you have made wrong entries, you should be promptly correcting them as well. You also have to reconcile your accounts every 5 weeks, signed off by the COFA, which is the Compliance Officer for Finance and Admin. Yeah, I think these are the points to remember from the SRA accounts. I have tried to capture in this presentation as much as I can. But of course, would be helpful to read the SRA accounts. They're not huge. 2011 were really bad. They were really big. This 2019, they are not that big.
Yeah, I was just sort of reading these rules.
Okay. So move on then.
Yeah, I mean, should we check with everybody else? Do you want to move on to the next slide?
Do you want to cover this part as well, just as a refresher on how MCT marking criteria?
Yeah, I could do that. And then maybe we can come back to the rest of the sticking points. So one of the things that I would just like to sort of mention is that you need to remember the MCT marking criteria while you are taking the MCT. And that is, one is there's no negative mark, which essentially means that it's important that you attempt every question. Um, you also need to remember multiple answers will not be counted. So make sure that you're not marking two answers correctly. And there's also an option for you to mark as a review. So let's say that you're spending a lot of time on a particular question. What you can do is, and you're spending more than 2 minutes, just what you can do is just mark the question as review, mark as review, answer the question, and then you can mark it as review. And at the end of the exam, you can actually revisit all those questions that you were not sure about. So, if you've marked a particular question for review, you will see a grid at the end of your assessment where you can actually go back to it. So you can click on it, you can go back to it, and you can spend some more time. But make sure that you still, even if you're marking a question for review, make sure that you attempt the question. Just put any answer, even if you don't know the answer, just put something and you can come back to it. The reason being, sometimes you might just run out of time at the end of the assessment and you will actually not get your time to go back to the markers review. So make sure that you click on some answer and then you can come back to markers review.
I have a question, Priyasha. If I have marked an answer as a review, and if I'm not able to visit it or revisit it, will it have any impact on my assessment, or will
Yeah, no, it doesn't have any impact, because if you're not able to revisit it, then the SRA will just take Kaplan will just take whatever that you've marked as the correct answer as your answer. So that's what even I had done. I had marked various questions as review, and of course I wasn't able to get back to it. But I mean, it's not like you've missed out on it. Whatever that you've marked as your answer is considered by Kaplan as your answer. So marking for review is more like it's for your own internal reference. So okay, so that's all on marking criteria. I'm going to quickly discuss time management as well. Again, read the instructions carefully. One of the things that you could do to save time is, if you notice, all the MCT questions, there's a paragraph and there's a question stub. So what I would advise is that you read the question stub first, because that will give you a hint of what you need to look out for. Then you can read the paragraph and then you can quickly go through the 5 options. So that's one tip that might be useful to some of you. So when you're practicing questions, you can try that and see if it works for you, because when you read the question, then you will actually know what they're asking. So even while you're going through the paragraph, you can accordingly and cherry pick the information that you actually need. The MCT is also a bit of a marathon. So you have 2 hours, 45 minutes, and you have to answer 90 questions. You have about 2 minutes per question, actually a little less than 2 minutes. So if you're spending more time on a question, like I said the last time, make an intelligent guess, move on. You can always come back to it at the end after you mark for review. Of course, there are some questions which are going to be straightforward, so you can save time there. But do not spend more than 2.5 minutes on a question. There will be a timer on the screen, so you can always pace yourself accordingly. Always keep a track at regular intervals, especially, have a look at the timer at regular intervals. You are going to have a calculator, and you will also have a pen and a paper, or they'll give you like a white space with like a small whiteboard with a pen. So if you want to jot down some notes, then you can always do that. And then of course, the last point was something that I've already mentioned, utilize the mark for review option. So I would say these are the key sort of points that you can keep in mind while you are taking the assessment. Make sure that you're not wasting time on any particular question. Again, for solicitor's account as well, if you still haven't understood the concept, don't worry about it. Try to use the rule of elimination, so you can at least make a guess, which would sort of give you, increase your odds of getting the right answer. And maybe, at the end, we can also just quickly revise all the key things that you need to read. So in case you have the time to spend a little bit for solicitor's account, then we can quickly guide you on what are the resources that you sort of need to cover. I don't know, is there any other slide after this, or no?
No.
I think that's about it. Great. Yeah. So maybe we can do a quick revision of what we sort of need to do for accounts. And this is what I've gathered, Asta, so you can just, supplement what I'm saying. The first thing would be to quickly sort of have a look at the 4 columns and to try to understand that particular rule. So I think in a way, memorizing that rule helps. Mm-hmm. Then the second would be to also sort of remember the key errors that can come in an exam, which is you can't have 2 credits, there's double entry bookkeeping, so you can eliminate some of the wrong answers that way. Mm-hmm. And I think the third is also to memorize some of the key entries that could sort of come in the exam. So we've listed a few. One is, let's say a client, you serving a bill to the client, abatement of fees, bad debts, dishonor of checks.
Yes.
And then maybe some of your VAT entries. So I think if you sort of memorize these sort of entries, if you can't understand the concept, then, that would also give you like an edge while you're answering questions. So at least when you see a question, you would know what are the accounts that are being affected. And you also get an idea about what's to be debited, what's to be credited. So I think these simple things would probably help you at least attempt a question. Is there anything else that, Asta, you think we can mention?
Do you just, maybe people have this question that how many questions can one expect in solicitors' accounts?
I think that's a good question. One of the things also that you need to remember is that most of your questions are divided into equally between the 11 topics. And secondly, another thing that you need to remember, solicitor's account is also a subtopic of, of professional conduct and SRA account rules. So they're not going to ask that many questions. I would say it could be, let's say, it's about 15 questions per each of your 11 topics. So you can say it could be between 5 to 7 questions for your exam. So it's not really a huge amount. You also need to remember is that the pass mark is about 58 to 59%, 57 to 58%. So even if you leave out solicitor's account, you can still pass the exam.
Yes.
So if you're still struggling with it, I would say, especially in the last minute, you can always skip it. But the objective of today's session was to give you a few pointers as to how you can sort of read the topic and how you can eliminate wrong answers.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask something else?
Yeah, sure.
One of my friends just tell me that the questions are not mounted equally. For example, equity, trust, and other topics are more important then because there's going to be more questions on these topics. I think that's wrong because you said it's going to be equally divided.
I mean, I think it depends on exam to exam, but in my experience, it was pretty much equally divided. There will be a little bit of here and there because they might, for example, they might not want to ask you that many questions on EU law because of Brexit. They might ask fewer questions there. But it's not like they're going to ask you 10 questions on solicitor's account, that would be too much. They would, it would be sort of equally divided. Maybe it could be maximum, maybe 7, I would say.
And I feel,
and also, some questions would be theoretical also, you know,
Yeah.
you need to remember that. So not all of them will be practical.
Yeah, and also I've just attempted more questions as much as possible, and I've got 15 to 60. One exam is, for example, 60, and one exam is really disappointing, 50, maybe under 50. Does it concerning thing? I mean, there is not so much time left for the exam, so I don't want to be upset for my results. So give me some tips about this.
I think I could help you out there, because even when I was giving my mock tests, I was pretty much failing most of them. So even I was panicking at the last minute. Yeah, I think I from what I remember, I just cleared about 3 to 4 MCTs, and also it was my fault because for MCT I prepared at the very last minute. So I was sort of I was struggling to clear the mock tests, but so I think the mock test generally would be slightly more difficult in the actual exam, but I don't want to say that. Because you know, some people feel that the MCT is more difficult than the mock test. So everybody has a different experience.
Yeah.
But in general, a lot of people tend to not, you know, pass the mock tests initially when they're practicing.
Thank you so much.
There is a few, I think you have a few days left. Are you taking it in July?
Yeah, next week. Just six days left.
Oh, okay, yeah, all the best for that. I would just say that, yeah, keep practicing the mocks every day. Try to do 1 mock every day.
I do twice mock, and once the results are up, and I'll find out my weakness topic, and I'll concentrate on these topics as well.
Yeah, and also another thing is, in the last minute, you know, like I said, if certain topics are too difficult, try to focus on the topics that you're strong on. So at least that you can max your scores there. So for example, let's say that, you know, you can't do, like, this is what I did for the MCT. Like, I couldn't really do all the calculations for corporate tax. So I decided that, you know, if I did come across a question which involved too much of calculations, I would guess it. And so I didn't really waste my time on those topics which I couldn't understand. So, you know, I tried to focus on my strengths and make sure that, you know, I was getting a higher score on those subjects.
Yeah.
Do you know how soon after the exams that students get their results?
3 weeks. I had it in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think 3 weeks as well. I've heard.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, 3 to 4 weeks.
Also, will you be having any more sessions before the exam?
Is there any particular session that we were not really contemplating any other session before the July MCT? But is there any other particular session that you would like, and we can, you know, internally see if we can, we might just think about.
Well, like you said, I completely don't understand taxation, and I was gambling with the idea of just not learning about it and focusing on my strengths. But then, you know, sometimes the questions are so tricky that even the subjects that you are familiar with, you know, tend to miss the best answer, which I've noticed while I'm practicing my MCT. So I don't want to just leave anything to chance. I want to make sure that I have my best chance at, you know, actually passing the exam.
Yeah, I think in the last minute, I would say, you know, if you're finding tax and the calculations difficult, then maybe you should just leave it.
Yeah.
You know, because you'd rather, I would say you'd rather focus on property and equity, which are conceptual questions in which you can actually, you know, you can actually understand them a little better than the calculations.
And professional conduct is also, I felt professional conduct was easier than other subjects, because it's very like, is right or wrong, right? So I felt if you have to choose between professional conduct and accounts, I would now focus more on professional conduct part than in A3 module.
Okay.
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, I think it would be prudent to leave out tax questions if you haven't touched it yet, and if you're finding it a bit difficult to understand. I think, yeah, equity and property is another area where a lot of people do struggle with. It would have been, actually, we would have been happy to conduct one, but I think it might be difficult for us to cover a lot of concepts in, you know, like a 1 hour webinar. But it's definitely a very good feedback that we can consider for, you know, like a session at some point. But are all of you giving the July MCT, or are some of you taking it in August?
July.
Okay, July. Okay, most of you. Yeah, I think, yeah, there is actually an August one. I think some of the July candidates have been sort of slotted for an August session. So there has been some changes that the Kaplan has made. Just in general, do you have any other questions on accounts? I know it's too technical to go through in 1 hour, but the idea was to just, you know, give you a few pointers on what you can read, what are the rules you can memorize, and how you can sort of approach the topic.
Sorry, Priyasha. Just one question before we get to accounts. The marking criteria, if you have answered a question, but you've not marked it for review, you are pretty sure about it, but maybe at the last minute before you run out of time, you want to change it. Is it possible to do that?
Yeah, you can. The only problem is that if you haven't marked for review, what's going to happen is you will not remember what the number of that question was, right? So it'll be difficult for you to get to that question. So if you want to, so try to make a note of it. And the key way to make a note of it is to mark for review. Because if you haven't marked for review, then it would be practically difficult to remember what question was it, you know. So you won't really be able to get back to it.
Okay, thanks.
We will share the presentation by email. I'm just having a look at the chat box. Theoretical questions there's another question by Arifa. What type of theoretical questions may be asked on solicitor's account? Asta, do you have any update, inputs on that?
For example, retention of accounts, how long do we have to retain the accounts? So Rule 13 is the storage and the retention of accounting records, and you must retain them for 6 years. So that's a theoretical question, which something we can cover when you read the rules. So it's Rule 13. I just said 6 years, guys, to retain the accounts.
Yeah, I think they might also ask you questions like what would come under business account, or what would come under your client account, those sort of things.
Or an entry which is generally looks theoretical, but it's not like how it's presented. It could be like, do you have to debit it or credit it, I think. But yeah, I think in theory on this, A3 would be more professional conduct.
Yeah, I think for those taking the January MCT, because I'm having a look at the chat again, you still have time. So I would say that this session could have given you some pointers on how to, you know, approach accounts. But yeah, you can, this session was more for, I think, somebody taking the July MCT, because we couldn't really go into the details. It's just like a brief overview. And there's another question, which of course we've discussed it, but I'm just going to cover it again. Do you think it could be a good strategy to focus on the strengths and skip and spend less time on accounts, tax? Yeah, I mean, I think in the last minute, of course, it is good to spend time on accounts and tax, but if you're thinking that it's taking too long, then you should just focus on the strengths, and that's what I did as well. I would say last minute, you know, every day try to do one session, mock session, and if possible on another, like maybe a few days before the assessment, you can also do a whole 2-hour 45-minute session. So do a 2-hour 45-minute session, take a break of 1 hour, do another 2-hour 45-minute session. So you sort of get an idea about how exhausting it can be. But of course, on the D day, the advantage is that you will have your adrenaline rush, so that will help you through the exam, because it's quite long. And also remember that, make sure that you carry refreshments, those sort of things, to your assessment center. When I took the assessment, we didn't really have any cafeteria in our assessment center. So, you know, if you wanted like coffee or tea, we didn't really have access to that. We only had access to water. That's, you know, those are the key things that I can remember. Carry a hoodie or a jacket, it can get cold. And like I said, food as well for your brain food. That's a good question. What kind of food snacks would you recommend for brain food? I think it depends from person to person, but I do know like one of my friends, she took Snickers and that fueled her pretty much through the 2 hours, 45 minutes. I think I had also started taking like, some chocolates and of course like a sandwich. I think that was useful for me. I didn't have access to tea and coffee, so I was a bit disappointed about that, but I still managed to survive through. And like I said, your adrenaline is what pushes you through those 2 hours, 45 minutes. So, I mean.
During Priyasha, did we get water? I don't remember getting water.
I do remember getting water. There was a place where you could, but I think you had to carry it inside in a glass or something like that. Mm-hmm. That was outside the exam room.
You have to leave the session to go out to drink water, is what I remember. So you couldn't, if I remember it correctly, you couldn't take water with you in the exam, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think because also another thing you need to remember is that each center is different, you know. So sometimes they might, they do follow these standard rules, but some centers they might, like I think in our case, they allowed us to carry a glass of water, you know, as long as we didn't carry our own water. Mm-hmm. So just carrying like a glass of water was okay. Oh, but okay, but they're saying that we can't take water in now. There is a comment. Yeah, that could be potentially the case because you know, they are quite strict with taking things inside. You do have a locker for all your personal stuff, but you can access them in your break, so that's not a problem. Okay, so is there any other, you know, like closing thoughts that you have, asked her?
I think yeah, just now that it's very last minute and we're covering only for last minute, I think do as much. I mean, just what if I was in this position, I would just give 2 hours and spend 2 hours only on accounts, and then say, okay, this is how much I can do, and then I trust that I have just focus on the mock exams and practice questions, and then trust that whatever I have learned will come, and whatever I heard today would probably hit in the exam, and it'll be a good luck. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip. Spend, I think, 2 to 3 hours on Solicitors account, like maybe on an early morning, if you're a morning person, start your day. Whatever that you can grasp on accounts, you can do that. So like I said, learn those 4 columns. Also just try to memorize the key accounts which are affected for common transactions, like transfer of client money to business account, dishonor of checks, abatement of fees, bad debts. So remember those accounts which are being affected and what's credited, what's debited. I think if you remember these key things, you pretty much would be able to answer most of your questions. So actually you can cover it in 2 to 3 hours. Another thing is, I think that's about it for accounts. Yeah, another question that I have is, do all of you have access to like a training provider's resources for accounts, or are you utilizing your own, or have you like are you utilizing the OUP books? Yeah, I know it's a difficult question to ask a large audience. QLT School. Yeah, QLT School has, I would say, I also use QLT School. So they have quite a lot of examples. So that would be useful. You can actually go through their examples and you will get an idea, because there is a pattern which is essentially followed for solicitors account. So once you understand that pattern, once you understand what's credited, what's debited, you know, you pretty much would be able to attempt a question when you get in the MCT. If you want to practice, if you're not using a training provider and you need more practice questions, then you can actually, register on the QLTS Geek website, and you can practice. We have about 4 mock sessions and a free practice session as well, so you can definitely take advantage of that. We also do have a discount code for people who are registering at the moment. I haven't really used Barbary, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. But I've heard from people that it's a decent course. Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't really taken a training provider and you've registered for Jan, then what I would say is that there are a few books which you can buy, the OUP books, and that would give you like a good reference for your studies, and then you can always do practice questions on QLTS Geek. We're also sort of going to supplement our application with the flashcards and a lot more information, which will be useful for those who don't have training providers. Of course, if you have training providers, then you would have decent resources. But for those who don't, we're trying to work towards creating some sort of an affordable content. Another question is, will the OEP books be enough for non-law subjects like solicitor's account? I do have a list of books that people who don't have access to training providers use. So I can do a quick check on that, on what do people use for solicitor's account, and I can get back to you. Because I think there is an OUP book on solicitor's account, and that should be good enough. Yeah, I pretty much like the OUP books. They're quite comprehensive. But I think I got a good idea today. We should definitely prepare a cheat sheet for solicitor's account ASTA, and the key entries, like maybe a sheet with all the key entries. That would definitely be useful for our candidates.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think that's about it. I think we've covered all the questions. If there's any last minute stuff, then we can cover it now. Or what you could do is you could send a message to Asta or myself, and we'll try to get back to you. If you're taking the July MCT, if you have any questions, what you can do is you can connect with us on LinkedIn as well, and we can try to basically try to get back to you. Yeah, another thing that is good for solicitors account could also be LPC answered, law answered books. They have some books for GDL, which is quite useful. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. So I think that's about it for today. All the best for your assessments. If you have any questions, like I said, just message us on LinkedIn and we'll try to help you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Okay, yeah, thanks, everyone.
Useful. Bye.
Bye.